You've seen the headlines, right? These massive billion-dollar projects that are supposed to shape our future, but they end up just wildly over budget and years behind schedule. So today, we're going to dig into why that happens. And let me tell you, it's probably not for the reason you think. Okay, let's look at the Scottish Parliament building, for example. The initial budget? A pretty tidy £40 million. Sounds reasonable, but the final bill? £410 million over budget. That's not just a little oops, it's more than 10 times the original estimate. And trust me, this is not a one-off thing.
Or how about this one? The Berlin-Brandenburg Airport. The budget for that thing just ballooned by 4.2 billion euros. And get this, it opened 9 years late. Why? Well, officials found over 66,000 defects. I mean, everything from the fire safety systems to how the cables were laid out. A total mess.
And look, this isn't some problem from the past. It's happening right now. The renovation of the Dutch parliament, it's already blown past its budget by 2.2 billion euros, and it's running 5 years late. And counting. The meter is still running on that one.
So it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? You have teams of experts, you have billions of dollars, you have all this modern technology. So how do these mega projects get it so wrong so often? Well, the answer is actually surprisingly simple, and it has absolutely nothing to do with pouring concrete or raising steel beams.
See, the real problem, the place where it all goes wrong, is right at the very beginning. It's in a phase called the front end. Now, this is the supercritical planning stage. It's where the big decisions are made, and it's where projects are basically set up for either huge success or, well, catastrophic failure. And this is all happening long before anyone even thinks about starting construction.
So to really get this, let's just quickly walk through the typical life of a major project, right? First, you have the idea. You identify a need. Then, you select and define the best way to meet that need. Then, and only then, do you actually start building it. That's the execution phase. And after all that, you've got years, maybe decades, of operating and maintaining the thing. Now, most of us would think the big, expensive mistakes happen during the building part, right? Well, we'd be wrong.
And here's the absolute key. The most critical, cost-defining decisions, the ones that are hardest to change later, they're all made right there at the start, in those first couple of phases. I'm talking about choices about the location, the technology you're going to use, the overall design. These things have huge cascading effects that ripple through the entire rest of the project.
And if you need a number to wrap your head around this, here it is. This one changes everything. A stunning 75% of a project's total lifecycle costs are locked in during those initial planning phases. Just let that sink in for a second. Before a single shovel ever hits the ground, 3/4 of the money is basically already spoken for. It's set in stone. And that is why those early decisions matter so much. You know, the long-term cost to just operate and maintain a big project can be up to 20 times the initial price to build it. So think about it. That cheap material you chose up front to save a little cash, that could mean decades of incredibly expensive repairs down the line. It's simple. The front end is everything.
Okay, so if the problem is not paying enough attention at the start, then the fix is pretty obvious, right? You have to do the exact opposite. And there's a name for this. It's a concept called front-end loading, or FEL for short. The easiest way to think about it is that old carpenter's saying, measure twice, cut once. Except here, we're applying it on a billion-dollar scale.
What front-end loading really means is you're deliberately putting way more effort, way more resources, and way more time into the early phases. It's all about doing the heavy lifting and the hard homework up front. I mean, analyzing every possible risk, exploring every single option, and nailing down every little detail, all before you commit the major resources.
Now, the way you actually enforce this kind of discipline is with something called a stage gate process. And you can think of it like a series of really tough exams for the project. A project can only pass through a gate to get to the next phase and get more funding if it proves it has met some incredibly strict criteria. So, Gate 1 is all about feasibility. Is there even one viable solution here? Then Gate 2 asks, okay, have we chosen the best possible concept out of all the options? It's only after passing these grueling checks that a project even gets close to the final investment decision.
And a huge part of being able to pass through those gates is changing the way you think about cost. You just can't look at the construction budget alone. Nope. You have to learn to see the real price tag. And you do that by thinking in terms of the total cost of ownership.
The perfect way to picture this is the project cost iceberg. What you see above the water, the tip of the iceberg, that's the sticker price. That's your initial investment and the construction costs. But the real danger, the huge part you don't see, is lurking below the surface. That's the real cost of running the thing for the next 30, 40, maybe 50 years. All the operations, the maintenance, the upgrades, and even getting rid of it at the end.
And when you break it down, it's pretty shocking. In a lot of cases, that initial capital investment is only about 15% of the total cost. A whopping 80% comes from just operating and maintaining the thing over its lifetime. So if you ignore that 80% during the planning phase, well, you're not just being short-sighted, you are literally planning for failure.
So really, it all boils down to a pretty simple choice. You can either invest the time and effort into careful, disciplined planning now, or you can pay an exponentially higher price in overruns, delays, and flat-out failures later on. There's really no middle ground on this.
So what does a successful project actually look like in practice? Well, it pretty much always comes down to a few key things. You need those defined phases with clear decision gates. You have to be focused on the full asset lifecycle, not just the sticker price. You need clear goals for each phase, strong governance to make the tough calls, and you absolutely have to be managing risks from day one.
Look, if you remember just one thing from all this, make it this. The fate of a billion-dollar project is not decided by cranes and construction crews. The seeds of success, or failure, are sown in conference rooms, on spreadsheets, long before the first shovel ever hits the ground. So, the next time you see a headline announcing some exciting new mega project, a new airport, a new bridge, what's the first question you're going to ask about its plan? I'm willing to bet it won't be, how much is it going to cost to build? Instead, you'll be asking, how well did they plan the front end?